Today, we are testing the e-commerce email marketing platform Klaviyo, and we're going to set up an account, walk through that setup process so you can see the features, you can see inside the platform, and make a decision as to whether or not Klaviyo is going to be a good fit for your business or not. Now, the first thing to say with Klaviyo is it's obviously aimed at e-commerce. If you're not an e-commerce platform, this is definitely not going to be the right platform for you. It's all kind of built around this notion of connecting with your e-commerce platform or your shop, pulling all that data, and then sort of having very sort of e-commerce centered pre-built templates and options to market to your users off the back of. So the first thing that I really like about Klaviyo is how they've divided up their platform. Before we jump into the platform, I think this is worth touching on because I think their website does a better job explaining this than the platform itself. So Klaviyo is divided into these three areas. We have database, learning, and experiences. So database is essentially exactly kind of what it says on the tin. It's connecting to your e-commerce or your shop platform, so whether it's Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, or many others, pulling all that data in and creating a profile for each customer or each prospect that you have on your list. That's really crucial because it's those profiles that allows Klaviyo to send really targeted marketing campaigns to later on. You can also segment those customers into buckets. So that might be people who have bought from you in the last 90 days, the last 30 days, people who maybe have bought more than a certain number of times. So those segments become really crucial, again, to ensure that you're sending extremely personalized marketing. The second point is learning. Now, this is maybe just a sort of fancy way of saying it's their analytics platform. But Klaviyo go kind of one step further. They do a really nice job with this feature called benchmarks. Again, we'll look at this inside the platform in a moment, but I think it's worth touching on because it's something that really makes Klaviyo different. Because Klaviyo is just for e-commerce platforms, they have a lot of data on performance data across different types of e-commerce businesses. So whether you sell toys, whether you sell fashion, clothing, or I don't know, cosmetics, Klaviyo have data on sort of, what your expected open rate should be, what your conversion rate should be. And so you can benchmark yourself against people, not just in e-commerce, which is quite a broad category, but in your specific area of e-commerce. The predictive analytics is also really cool. You can see when a customer is expected to buy from you next. You can see things like how much revenue you can sort of expect in a few months' time. So a combination of sort of forecasting, but in e-commerce, that makes a real difference because you can sort of adjust your budget, but adjust your marketing spend accordingly based on that. And then the final part is experiences. Now, this is really kind of just email and SMS. Forms is kind of how you kind of get people into the platform. But where Klaviyo do a really good job here, I think, is they have a lot of pre-built flows and pre-built campaigns that you can use that are sort of specifically aimed at achieving very kind of specific e-commerce jobs. So things like reducing a cart abandonment, increasing upsells, etc. So unlike if you were to go to something like HubSpot or ActiveCampaign, which are really good platforms, but they're very generic. They have to sort of focus as much for e-commerce as software companies, as hairdressers. So the templates, you might be lucky if you get the odd flow or the odd template aimed at e-commerce. Everything in Klaviyo is focused around e-commerce. So all the email templates, all the flows that you get are going to be sort of pretty close to what you would want to use. So with that said, we're going to start sign up with an account. So I've got an account kind of ready to go over here that we can log into, but just to sort of show you the login process, there is no need for a credit card with this one, which is nice. So we can just go here, charhub.com, I'm just going to pop this in. So if I remember rightly, you get an email sent across to you, and there's quite a nice little onboarding. So before you get the verification email, you can select your e-commerce platform and start setting these up. If you do this, you just enter the URL and it will start to import products in the background. How many contacts do we have? So I'm just gonna see if I can get away with popping in some test data here, just so I can move on quickly. It might validate it. Let's see. Nope, we're good. My spelling today is not on point. Here we go. So what is your business goal? Email and SMS. So once you've done this, I think you receive a verification email. And once you click that, it will jump you straight into the platform. One thing just to touch on before we jump in, because it is kind of a major consideration with Klaviyo, is that the pricing is certainly not the cheapest. So here we can sort of see, just to kind of give you a bit of an indication, for a very small list, you can start for free, but it's only 250 contacts. If you're considering something like Klaviyo, I'd imagine you'd be starting at something like maybe 1,000 contacts at the minimum. So it's not too bad at this size. If we get up to 10,000, you can see we're looking at kind of 190, 175, $190 a month. If we get up to, let's say, 50,000, it starts to get quite pricey. But obviously the ROI that you potentially would be getting at that size of list for e-commerce would be pretty high. So just to kind of see how that compares to, I think I would probably consider the main competitor to Klaviyo at the moment would be OmniSend, because they're also very e-commerce centric, and from a sort of feature and platform perspective, they're also very, very good. So OmniSend are marginally more affordable, not a huge amount. So you can see email SMS here is $190 versus $170. If we go up to 50,000 contacts, we're looking at $700 for OmniSend versus $800. So it's not a huge amount in it. I think ActiveCampaign would be similar. HubSpot would be a lot more expensive, and I don't think that would make sense because it's obviously less e-commerce focused. So if you are on a budget, not that it makes a huge amount of difference because it's only $50 at the lower end, $100 at the high end. But OmniSend might be worth a look at, but otherwise, yeah, just to bear in mind, it's definitely not the cheapest platform around. So with that said, we will jump into the platform. So once you have verified your email, you get dropped into a sort of home screen like this. As you start building flows, as you get data, as you send campaigns out, this will populate with more and more data. What I'm going to do is kind of work down the left here, but to begin, I'm going to jump over to lists and import some contacts just so we have a little bit of data to look at when we're looking through some of the other features. Okay, so here we can see we've got a list of some of the pre-built segments and lists. So things like engaged in the last 30, 60, 90 days, new subscribers, new SMS subscribers. I've gone ahead and created a new test list, really kind of straightforward. So we can just go here, enter a bit of information, create a list, upload contacts, and then it's really just a case of drop in your CSV. You can also kind of import contacts from integrating a e-commerce platform or a different CRM. And really nice, it's kind of automatically picked up email, first name, organization. We can then hit import, and it does take a few minutes. I was quite surprised by how long it took to import. It seems there's kind of a queuing system. But as soon as they've imported, each contact gets created as a profile. So as I mentioned at the start of this video, Klaviyo works by creating kind of a profile of every single person that interacts with your e-commerce shop, whether they're a customer or a prospect. And you can go into any single one of these profiles and see the entire history, how they've interacted with all the messages, all the kind of campaigns that you've sent them, as well as kind of their history from a sort of shopping perspective. So I've connected ChargeBee, which is a platform that we use for transaction data. But if you're using Shopify, WooCommerce, Delusion, anything like that, you'll see all that. All of those kind of events appear here as different metrics. So if I just go to one, for example, here, you can see here via ChargeBee, we've got things like cancelled subscriptions. So you'll see things like invoice payments, what products they've bought, all that here. A really nice thing on the profile view, I really like that Klaviyo give you the kind of the 30-day view as well as the all time, so you can see whether the customer is kind of becoming more engaged or less engaged over time, which is quite nice. And then up the top here, we can sort of dive. Obviously, we don't have any campaign data here for now, but you'll be able to see all the campaigns that they've received, all the messages and how they've interacted with them. And then you can also see the sort of longer term trends on the chart view. So you can pick any metric and then sort of see like over time how the sort of trend has changed. So that's sort of where I will leave it for now on the profile view. Obviously, the one thing that you're not seeing here in a huge amount of detail is sort of the e-commerce data. So that's because in this review, we've not connected this to like a Shopify. If you had, you would see a lot more of the data for how people are kind of interacting with your e-commerce platform coming through here. And arguably that's sort of one of the most sort of important or crucial bits of data. So we don't have an active one that I can integrate in this review, but that would all appear here. So moving on to the experience side of things. So the first thing I want to look at is campaigns. So I'm going to create a test email campaign. And really what I'm looking for here is two things. The first is to get a feel for the quality of the templates, because that can often make quite a big impact on the amount of time that it takes to put emails together. And the other thing that I'm interested in is the visual editor, because I've heard a few mixed reviews about the visual editor in Klaviyo. So here we've got the templates. My first impression is these look really nice. So templates can often be a bit of an afterthought with a lot of the email platforms that we've tested. They're never too bad, but often they're sort of, there's little incentive for general email marketing platforms to sort of really invest in them. Generally, we only see good email templates in the platforms that have a vested interest in the conversion rate or the conversion outcomes. So ClickFunnels would be a good example, because you use a platform like that to get more conversions. So really nice to see that all of these look like they've been professionally designed. They all look pretty usable, straight, without too much kind of additional editing work. So yeah, these look pretty impressive. So I'm just going to pick let's choose this template, and hopefully this takes us into the visual editor. Perfect. So this all feels pretty familiar. It feels very kind of similar to virtually every other email marketing platform. Your kind of usual WYSIWYG editor. So presumably I can sort of drag options around, which is nice. That seems to work pretty well. So as I mentioned, from the interviews that we conducted with lots of different email marketers, there was quite a lot of mixed reviews about Klaviyo's email editor. There was quite a number of people who commented saying that it can be quite buggy at times. So generally, where we sort of see a lot of those bugs appear with visual editors like this is normally it's when you're sort of dragging things around and resizing. So I'm sort of, as we speak, trying to sort of see if I can cause any kind of funny issues, but so far it seems okay. But yeah, just to be aware, that's something that has come up a few times. In terms of the blocks that we've got, this looks pretty standard. I would have liked to see a few more options here, if I'm honest. Given that this is kind of an e-commerce platform, to only see one option here, which presumably is like a recommended product block, feels maybe a little bit underwhelming. But that's quite a nice feature that it seems you can have different product feeds and sort of pull products in dynamically. So presumably once you've connected your e-commerce platform, you'd be able to create different product feeds based on sort of different categories or trending products, that sort of thing, to pull in here, or we can sort of statically just pull in a list of products. But yeah, that feels possibly a little bit light compared to sort of other platforms where the list of options we have is quite wide. I don't know if maybe when we sort of click into these, we have maybe a few sort of more options. It doesn't seem like it, but possibly that's something I'm missing. If you have used Klaviyo in the past and I am missing something, please do drop a comment below to let me know. But this is nice. So we've got conditional logic. We can sort of hide and display sections based on a profile behavior. Content repeat. So to repeat this content, specify a variable to loop over, as well as an alias. So I don't entirely understand what that is doing, but that sounds interesting. And then here, so we've got duplicate, we've got a star. Okay, so that turns it into universal content that we can use sort of between different campaigns, different templates, and then a delete option. We can make entire blocks display on desktop or mobile only. So all pretty standard, but some of the more kind of advanced things like the conditional logic, it's nice to see them here. You don't kind of get those features in all platforms. That's giving me a kind of an indication this is kind of on the more advanced ends, which you would sort of expect of Klaviyo. But yeah, the only thing that I'm not particularly a fan of here is just the sort of the lack of options for the campaigns. But other than that, all seems pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and preview and test that. So that's nice. So we can sort of preview it as a different profiles. Fine. So now if we save and exit, let's see what options we've got in the review side of things. So we can set this up as an A/B test, which is good. That's fine. I'm curious if there's any sort of spam checks or anything else we can do here. Okay, yeah, cool. So possible email content issues. So we found one block that either still has the default unmodified or is blank. So not so much a spam check, but maybe that would sort of display any other issues there. Yeah, okay. Nothing sort of blowing me away here, but this all seems reasonably good. And then we can either schedule the campaign or send now. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one there and jump into flows. So the first thing I really like about how Klaviyo approach flows is they have these really nice pre-built sequences that you can use straight away. When you first log into Klaviyo, there's quite a few more options here. I've done a bit of clicking around, so it's only showing the one, but you can click into view all ideas, and you can see kind of just how many of these sort of pre-built sequences you can get up and running with. Some of them are quite simple, whereas others are pretty advanced. I'm quite impressed that it's always a bit of a challenging balancing act with automation templates, because if a vendor like Klaviyo makes these too complicated, when you start using them, you end up spending quite a long time just customizing them and going through each email, changing it to sort of match your brand. Versus if they're too simple, then it's almost not very helpful. So I think Klaviyo have got the balance about right, where some of these are just pretty straightforward and you could add to this, whereas others do start to kind of introduce some more sort of advanced things like conditional splits, which help to kind of give a bit more inspiration. So some really nice things here. One thing I will say, and I'm not sure if this is because I clicked Shopify during the setup process, but a lot of these seem to be Shopify centric. I say I'm not going to sort of dwell too much on that because it may just be because I went through the Shopify flow. But if these are Shopify centric, then obviously that's not ideal if you're not using Shopify. So I'm going to create a flow from scratch, mainly so I can get a bit of a feel for the triggers. So it looks like I've got 4 broad options here. So when someone gets added to a list, when people will enter a dynamic segment, when they take a specific action or a metric, or based on time. So my initial reaction is that this list is not particularly long, but I think that's a bit deceiving because actually metric is almost like a catch-all for a lot of different triggers. Normally when I'm using a platform like something like ActiveCampaign, I'm choosing between 50 different triggers, whereas Klaviyo kind of group a lot of these into metrics. So here you can see we'd pull in all of the custom metrics that you set up, everything from when you integrate your e-commerce shop, that will automatically create lots of metrics. And these are the ones that really matter. So things like when someone purchases a product, when they invoice is generated, when there's a failed payment, cart abandonment, all that sort of stuff will be added here as a trigger. So we can do something like this. We can filter that trigger. We can filter it by segment. We can sort of add sort of layer upon layer of things to make that a bit more personalized. And then broadly, we have 5 different actions. So we can send emails, SMS, we can update the profile property, or any of their properties. We can send an internal notification, which is just an internal email, or we can fire a webhook. We have, of course, time delays, and then in terms of logic, we've got conditional splits and then trigger-based splits. So I'm just going to kind of add a few here just to kind of get a feel for the user interface. So really nice and simple, drag and drop, and we can sort of click into these to customize them. So I can say after 3 minutes, we can sort of do it into a specific day, a specific time. We can sort of layer those together, which is nice. And then conditional splits. So we can sort of send people into two different directions. One thing I'm not seeing is split A/B tests. So being able to like A/B test, does path A or path B convert better? It might be that this is actually built into the conditional split. So if we say, for example, let's split based on if someone is in our test list or not, presumably we would be able to see what proportion go this way versus this way. But what I'd like to have seen is a way of knowing, almost setting a goal for this conditional split and then seeing like path A or path yes, 20% of them achieve the goal versus only 10% who go through path B. So that is something that for a platform sort of fairly advanced, I would have hoped to see a bit more around split testing paths, but that's okay. We will let them off for now. So we have trigger split. So you're splitting based on metrics, presumably. So we can let's just have a bit of a play around. Create a distinct split in your flow based on characteristics of the trigger event. Okay, so based on failed payment, we could say if the failed payment is below $100, then go this route versus that route. So that's really nice. That the amount of personalization you could get from doing that is quite, yeah, would give you quite a lot of options. So let me just let's get rid of the no path. So that seems broadly kind of all the options we have available. I say I'm quite surprised by how relatively simple this is. I would have definitely hoped to see a little bit more in terms of kind of options for kind of what I can do here. But the platform for building flows is really intuitive. This is really kind of nice and easy. But yeah, it just feels maybe a little bit on the basic side. But anyway, we will jump out here. So I'm just going to put that into manual, and we will jump out there. So next on our list, we've got sign-up forms. So if we, again, the templates look really nice. It looks like we've got a combination of things like exit intents, some inline forms, kind of the pop-ups that we get at sort of the bottom right-hand screen, and then presumably there would be sort of some inline forms as well that we could use for things like contact. But most of these seem geared towards offers that we would trigger on exit intent. I'm guessing just from the sort of yeah, just the design of these. So I'm just going to go for one like this, and let's just set a few things. Create a form. So the WYSIWYG editor seems pretty similar to the email template editor. One thing that I do find a little bit odd in Klaviyo is that instead of just being able to click here and edit directly in line, you have to sort of edit it over here. It's not a big thing. That's you know, never going to be an issue, but just yeah, feels a little bit odd. It's just one of those things where kind of every other platform we've tested, it's kind of directly in line. And again, this list is pretty light. The only thing, you know, considering Klaviyo is all sort of focused around e-commerce, if we look at sort of similar platforms like Omnisend, there's so many options for things that we can pull in that are e-commerce centric. The only thing here that we've really got is coupons, which, you know, great, but it's not I think Klaviyo could probably do a lot more in this area to sort of make this work a little bit better. So we can add multiple steps to it. We can have a success confirmation page, teaser. I'm curious about. So this is just looks like it's just a thing down the bottom left down here. So you can sort of give people like a clickable thing that they can use to open that form. But yeah, I think that's all seems fairly straightforward from that. So we'll jump out of that. So we've already looked at lists and segments and profiles. Content, this is fairly self-explanatory. So we have all of our different email templates, and Klaviyo give you quite a lot of sort of pre-built ones out of the box that you can use. The list of products, so once you've integrated your e-commerce platform, this will kind of pull in all your products, all the product metadata, and you'll be able to use this directly in the as a metric, but also kind of within your email content. Images and brands, so this is just all the assets. So I believe when you integrate your shop, it will pull in the assets for you, but you can also upload your own fonts, your own images, and things like logos, etc. In here as well. So with the exception of conversations, which is essentially just being able to kind of have two-way conversation with your customers over SMS. The only thing that is kind of remaining here is the learning side of Klaviyo, so the analytics, which I think is an area that Klaviyo do a really good job of. So we've seen in some of the things like flows already that Klaviyo kind of works off this sort of creating these metrics. So you can create your own metrics and send kind of event data to it. Also, as you set up your integrations, Klaviyo will automatically create metrics for virtually anything it can find. So here we can see a list of all our different metrics. We have Klaviyo default things, so when people open emails, when they interact with SMS and push notifications. But also here we can see the ones we've pulled in from Chargebee. You also see things like from Shopify, WooCommerce, etc. A really nice thing that we haven't really touched on yet is benchmarks. This is quite impressive. So when you sign up for Klaviyo, you will tell Klaviyo your sort of sub category of e-commerce. So you can say like, we're a toy e-commerce website. And what you'll then kind of start to see is Klaviyo will give you benchmarks for all sorts of different metrics. So we can see things like average order value for toys and hobbies is $65. Some of these, you take away a pinch of salt because it's obviously quite variable business to business. But for things like email campaign interaction, it's going to be less variable. So you can also sort of see, average order value. This is also based on, you can sort of see how these benchmarks change over time. Email performance, I really like this. I think this is something that you don't really see elsewhere in any of the other email marketing platforms. And the fact that it's kind of shown over time is, so helpful for a lot of those conversations where, things do dip or you see a change in performance. To be able to sort of benchmark against similar companies makes a lot of those conversations significantly easier. And also just to kind of give yourself a target. If you're not quite at the benchmark for your industry, that can serve as quite a nice conversation starter to have with your team as to, if everyone else is getting an average 5% and we're only getting 3% open rate or click-through rate, then what can we do to improve that? So I really like this. I think this is really well executed, and really helpful. And another one of those things where I think if you're an e-commerce site, this feature really can add quite a lot of value compared to, say, going to a generic platform like HubSpot or ActiveCampaign. So that's benchmarks, and then when we sort of pull these features together, so the data we're getting from metrics and benchmarks, we can pull those together to create dashboards. So we don't have a huge amount of data here, so we're not going to see anything nice and visual, but just to give you a feel for kind of how this works, you have a lot of these kind of pre-built cards, pre-built dashboards, and we can get a sort of feel for what data we can pull in. So we've got deliverability data, which is super helpful. We've got conversion data by channel. We'll have product conversion data from the e-commerce platform that we pull in, as well as kind of all the standard stuff. So email flow, email funnel performance, all that sort of stuff. Another thing that is not shown here, but you do get access to in Klaviyo, is the predictive analytics. So you would be able to see like a forecast of how much revenue you're expected in future months, and predictions around things like when a user is expected to buy next. So I think, again, compared to a lot of the other tools that we've tested, I think Klaviyo do a really, really good job from a reporting perspective. It's a shame we don't get some sort of, we're able to kind of visualize how this looks in the empty state here. But I have seen some good kind of visuals of how this looks populated, which do look really nice. So that's broadly it from the learning perspective. So I'm going to wrap up the review of Klaviyo there. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Similarly, if you have any experiences with Klaviyo, good or bad, would love to hear about them. And I will include a link in the description below if you want to set up an account with Klaviyo. We do earn a small commission, I think. Doesn't affect how we, the editorial process or how we review these platforms, but it does help to fund all the research and the testing that we do. So we'd be massively appreciative if you're happy to use that. But yeah, I hope this has been useful, and yeah, until next time. Cheers.